Now, Jamie, I'll let you pick since you let me pick yesterday of who we want to go with first because we're going to talk Austin Hayes, Johan Rojas, Kyle Schwarber. There's a lot to talk about.
Let's just start with the meat. Kyle Schwarber.
The meat.
I mean, he is meaty. He's a home run hitter, so those are your meat of the order guys.
Start with the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, he looks like a guy that enjoys a steak. I think
he definitely looks like a guy that enjoys a steak.
I think meat very much applies to Kyle Schwarber.
He's probably the guy that sits down at the table with multiple plates and is like the last one getting up.
He kind of looks like
a
gentle meathead, like a kind meathead.
Oh, like not a mean guy. Not like a douche.
Like a good dude.
Yeah.
But a meathead.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm totally picking up.
You can be a good meathead.
That's a real thing.
There's bad meatheads.
That's also very real.
Yeah.
But this one's a good one. We've got a good egg. All right, let's get into Kyle Schwarber, the good meathead. Because Kyle Schwarber does have his final year of his contract he's heading into 2025. Here's some of the numbers that we had from Mr. Leadoff himself. As the DH this season, we did see some outfield play from him, which is why he's in the outfield group, of course. He played 150 games this season. He had a 248, 366, 485 slash line with 137 OPS plus. He did smash 38 home runs with 104 RBIs, 60 extra base hits, and 5 for speedy, slender Schwarber stolen bases. His leadoff home run record, 15. Set a whole Major League Baseball record for Kyle Schwarber. Now, for Kyle Schwarber, before I give you my actual grade, this was a great season for him, in my opinion. I thought that he lost a lot of weight. He looked much better in his base running. And also he just looked much better overall around his consistency. He was someone that took strides and was able to really be Mr. Reliable at times. And so I enjoyed the strides that he took this season. When you look at those numbers, I enjoy the fact that Kyle Schwarber was one that caught us by surprise in the early parts of the season. He definitely did a good job with his exit velocity at times. I mean, even late in the season, he was smashing balls. His postseason hits that he had were some of the highest exit velocities he had in his career. You know, you just saw him hitting a whole new tier of strength and power, of speed. He also was 9th across the league in runs, 8th in home runs, 10th in RBIs, and 3rd, unfortunately, in strikeouts. But Kyle Schwarber was one that, with all the records that he made, even all the questions people have had around him as leadoff hitter, becoming the first Phillies player to have back-to-back 100 RBI seasons since Ryan Howard did it from 2006 to 2011. And for Kyle Schwarber to have had this season that, although he struggled in the postseason after that leadoff home run, I thought it was a solid year. I thought he could have given you more. Absolutely. But I thought that he was one that, for the most part, when you really think about his splits and his numbers, especially in the season when they were struggling, he was one that you could count on. I mean, from April to May to June to July, he was pretty consistent. There was a slight dip in July in terms of his hits, as he had 15 hits. He also was dealing with some injury, of course, which naturally is going to have you playing less games. So in July, he only played 18 games, still had 14 hits in those 18 games. His splits were very consistent throughout the course of the season. And it was that postseason after the leadoff home run that you kind of wanted more from him. Like, that home run was great in game 1 of the NLDS, but we needed more from you.
Crickets.
And then we saw nothing from you the remainder of the postseason. So that was not great at all. But I'm going to give Kyle Schwarber a B-.
B-?
I give him a B-.
All right, so JP, this is, she's Professor Ice Queen. She has just hate and ice running through her veins when she gives out grades. She is diabolical, and then I'm like the hippy dippy, like, everybody tried hard and deserves good grades, guy. So
yeah, no,
you forget
on
the
B-
picture for the union show.
Yeah, no, seriously,
a B-.
Oh, that's low.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
JP, start thinking of your Kyle Schwarber grade.
So
we'll need you to balance us out.
I just feel like, for Kyle Schwarber, much like I said with Trey Turner, the expectation is for you to be one of the top 3 guys on this team. Trey, Kyle, and Bryce are held to a higher standard. And yes, Kyle Schwarber loved the fact he lost weight, loved the fact he looked fantastic at leadoff, how his base running was. Even his left field play was not bad. I mean, I didn't want to see him every day, but the times he was out there in left field, not awful. It's a B- for me. We need more from him. Kyle Schwarber needs to be the guy, similar to what we saw from even Nick Castellanos and Alec Boehm earlier on in the season. He needs to be a find the gaps guy, spray the ball around the field, give you, every time he's up to bat, give you something. It's a B-. And you can't disappear after that leadoff home run in the NLDS Game 1, and then the rest of the postseason we've got nothing from you.
Look, I'm giving him an A, and the only reason it's not an A+ is because of postseason recency bias. I'm fascinated that you gave him a B-.
I'm fascinated you gave him an A, like a 95, like a solid A.
I mean, this is a guy that increased his batting average nearly 30 points this year.
Oh my.
His on base went up 20 points. His strikeouts went down almost 20. He had 30 plus more hits than he did. While not, he did give up a little power. He went from 46, 47 to now 38. But I think that's something you can live with when he's batting in your leadoff spot, because he got on base. He had a ton of hits. A 366 on base is phenomenal from Kyle Schwarber. A 485 slugging, an 851 OPS, a 137 OPS plus. I would have given him an A+ if he had shown up in the playoffs. I thought he was really, really good this year. It helps that we don't have to see him in the field anymore. But to your point, he did look spry and quicker around the base pass. Appears to have lost a little weight, I think, this past offseason. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty thrilled with Kyle Schwarber. It's unfortunate the playoffs happened the way they did, but I think he's the stalwart of that locker room. He's the leader, and I thought he had a phenomenal year on the field.
Yeah, you're spot on, James. I mean, for me, I'll go somewhere in between. I'll probably go like...
That's usually where Tyler ends up.
Yeah, a B+, A-. And, look, it's nothing to do. I mean, we know what Schwarber is. I mean, at the leadoff spot, he's probably going to get you some power like you saw in Game 1. Like, he got you that home run, and that was big. And that should have catapulted the Phillies into a win. But my problem with Kyle Schwarber, honestly, is nothing that Kyle Schwarber can control. Like, I think that's something they need to kind of explore. It's possibly moving him out of that leadoff spot. I think it's an
interesting part of this offseason, yeah.
They got to think outside the box, and that's something that you need to think about because of the power that you just mentioned. And, look, he didn't have the same typical June, but it was still pretty good. But come playoff time, obviously, look, home runs are great. They're awesome. Mm-hmm. Renee showed us the Bryce Harper one, and it gets the crowd going. But in playoff baseball, you do need to move runners, and the Phillies really struggled with that, especially against the Mets. And so my problem with Kyle Schwarber is what are you going to do with him? Not necessarily the player, but the coaching behind him.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. And it's definitely, I mean, I could be talking to a B. I just, okay. All right.
You're moving it up? Peer pressured into a B?
No, I mean, he did improve. You look at his splits last year to this year, a 197, 343, 474 split last season. That's now increased to a 248, 366, 45. The postseason really does sting, of course, because in the 4 games, for him to have 16 at-bats and give you 2 hits, and of course, one of those hits was his leadoff home run, that's unacceptable. Granted, it was unacceptable for everyone to be so bad in the playoffs. So that carries a lot of weight for me. And then I do, of course, feel like there were at times that we still got a bit of that home run or bust. Kyle Schwarber, I think, took major strides, but in my opinion, for a guy, again, 1 year left in his contract, the expectation for who he is for this team, I still want more from him. Was it a better season than last year? Yes.
But in terms of hits and on base and average,
yeah.
but you did sacrifice 12 home runs. So if you're Kyle Schwarber should swing out of his shoes and try to put the ball on Mars every plate appearance, then you could say it's a down season. But I think from where this team had him in the leadoff spot, I think he improved a lot as a leadoff hitter. So I do think what JP said is a fascinating part of this offseason. How much do they actually weigh a tinker now? Because, we've talked about it before. Bryce Harper needs better protection in this lineup. Alec Bohm and Nick Castellanos are not really 4-hole hitters. Yeah. They're great 5- and 6-hole hitters. But, whether you move Bryce Harper up, I know in Todd Zalecki's newsletter the other day,
he brought it up.
He mentioned Bryson Stott as a possibility. Mm-hmm. But we talked about Bryson Stott and his grading and the regression he took. So do you feel comfortable putting him in leadoff? So I'd love to be a fly on the wall in those discussions they're having this offseason.
Yeah, and no, Tyler and I touched on it a little bit on Monday.
I thought that was an interesting nugget in Zalecki's newsletter.
It was interesting to bring up because Bryson Stott and Trey Turner have both been brought up as potential, outside of Bryce Harper, of course, potential guys that can move into that leadoff spot. Of course, as we know, it comes down to lefty-righty splits and different things like that. But when you look at the numbers for Kyle Schwarber in terms of his leadoff production, this season alone, he set so many records in the leadoff spot. His 100 RBIs that he had early on, but he had already tied like fourth most. When you look at the total number of leadoff home runs, that record he set at 15. His overall RBIs that he had as a leadoff were the top ever. I mean, once he crossed 100 RBIs, that was already tied for fourth most out of the leadoff spot since the stat became official back in 1920. We know that others that had set the record back in 2023 was Mookie Betts. Ronald Acuna had set the record as well. He's joined company of some of the, and shown he's one of the best leadoff hitters, not even for the Phillies, but in baseball history with his production. But for the Phillies offensively, does it make more sense for someone else to be leadoff if it allows you to have a better flow in terms of the rotation? So I don't think it would be anything that's a knock on Kyle Schwarber. To me, I think moving him out of the leadoff spot is not because he's struggling or he's bad as a leadoff hitter. It's more because it helps the team as a whole.
Yeah, I think he proved
to
he
have
did
a better
great
offense.
job at it this year.
So
Yeah.
I still do feel like for Kyle, he's on the cusp of like that B minus season. I still would like.
Can he be better utilized within the lineup?
I can't give anybody really a high grade except for like one or two guys in terms of like an A, because this team had such a poor second half of the season and a poor postseason. So it's hard for me to justify like, had things the last couple months been better, all these grades are bumped up. But as I said on day one, most times teachers curve up. I'm curving down.
Professor Ice Queen.
Curving down.
We all silly like the mayor.